I met Ryan when we were both 18, fresh out of high school, and I knew immediately he was exactly what I needed. While all my friends were dating these immature boys who couldn't even hold down part-time jobs, Ryan had this plan, this direction. He was starting an electrician apprenticeship, talking about building a real future, and honestly, I was smart enough to recognize a good thing when I saw it. He was cute, responsible, and completely devoted to me from day one. I remember thinking how lucky I was that someone with his work ethic and potential had chosen me. Those first few years were pretty good. I'll give him that. Ryan would work these long days learning the trade, coming home tired but always making time for me. He'd take me out to dinner when he got his apprentice paychecks, always talking about how someday he'd be making real money and we'd have this amazing life together. I loved hearing about our future, the house we'd buy, the trips we'd take, how he'd take care of me. It felt good being with someone who had ambition. Someone who wasn't going to be flipping burgers forever like half the guys from school. But here's the thing. Nobody tells you about dating someone so focused on work. It gets boring as hell after a while. Don't get me wrong. I appreciated that Ryan was building something. But Jesus, did he have to talk about electrical codes and job sites constantly? I'd try to tell him about my day at the gas station where I was working, and he'd listen for like 2 minutes before launching into some story about running wire through walls or whatever. I started feeling like I was dating a construction manual instead of an actual person. By the time we'd been together for 5 years, I was getting restless. I'd scroll through social media, seeing girls from high school living these exciting lives, moving to new cities, going to parties, meeting new people. And here I was in the same small town, hearing the same work stories every night. Ryan was sweet and stable, but where was the excitement? Where was the romance? I felt like I was 23, going on 40, and that wasn't what I'd signed up for. When Ryan proposed, I said yes because honestly, it felt like the logical next step. We'd been together forever. He had a steady job now, and everyone kept asking when we were going to get married. The wedding was nice enough, nothing fancy, but Ryan paid for everything and seemed so happy. I remember looking at him during our vows, thinking about how he really was a good guy, how I should be grateful to have someone so dedicated to me and our future together. But married life wasn't the exciting new chapter I'd imagined. If anything, Ryan got even more focused on work, talking about taking on extra jobs and building his reputation. He'd come home exhausted. We'd eat dinner while he told me about his day, watch TV, and go to bed. Rinse and repeat. I kept waiting for marriage to feel different, more special somehow, but it just felt like more of the same routine we'd already been in. The worst part was how everyone acted like I should be thrilled with my situation. My mom would go on about how lucky I was to have such a hardworking husband, how Ryan was going to be a great provider. My friends would compliment me on landing someone so stable and responsible, but nobody seemed to care that I felt invisible half the time, that my husband was more excited about electrical panels than he was about spending time with me. I started picking up extra shifts at the gas station just to have something to do, some way to feel useful. The job wasn't glamorous, but at least I got to interact with different people every day, instead of sitting at home waiting for Ryan to come back from work. That's where I met Marcus. He came in on a Tuesday afternoon, this good-looking guy, maybe a few years older than me, buying energy drinks and asking about the best route to the interstate. We got to talking, and he was funny, charming, actually interested in what I had to say. When I mentioned I was married, he didn't immediately back off like most guys would. Instead, he said something like, "Lucky husband," with this smile that made me feel something I hadn't felt in months. Marcus started coming in regularly after that, always timing his visits for when I was working. He'd buy something small and we'd chat for a few minutes. Nothing inappropriate, just friendly conversation, but he had this way of making me feel seen. Like I was actually interesting. He'd ask about my day, remember things I'd told him before, make jokes that actually made me laugh. It was such a contrast to coming home and having Ryan barely look up from his phone while he told me about conduit installations or whatever. I knew I was developing a little crush, but I told myself it was harmless. I wasn't doing anything wrong by being friendly with a customer. If Ryan was paying attention to me the way he should be, I probably wouldn't even notice other guys. But he was so caught up in his work, so focused on building this perfect future, that he was completely ignoring the present and me. The day everything changed started like any other. Marcus came in during my afternoon shift, but this time he seemed different, more direct. He complimented my hair, said I seemed too smart and beautiful to be stuck working at a gas station in a small town. We talked longer than usual, and when he was getting ready to leave, he asked if I'd ever want to hang out sometime. Just as friends. My heart was pounding, but I heard myself giving him my phone number. I told myself it was innocent, just someone new to talk to, someone who appreciated me for who I was instead of taking me for granted. Ryan would never even need to know because it wasn't like I was planning anything serious. Just a friend. Someone who made me feel interesting and alive again. Marcus texted me that same evening while Ryan was in the shower. Just a simple hey. It's Marcus from the gas station. Hope you don't mind me texting. I felt this little thrill reading it. This excitement I hadn't experienced in forever. We texted back and forth for a while. Nothing flirty, really. Just getting to know each other better. He told me about his job, asked about mine, made me laugh with stories about weird customers at his own workplace. Over the next few days, our texting became more frequent. Marcus would send me good morning messages, check in during my breaks, wish me good night. It felt amazing having someone who wanted to talk to me that much, who seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and feelings. Ryan barely looked up from his work stuff long enough to ask how my day was. But here was this guy who actually cared. I knew I was walking into dangerous territory, but I justified it by telling myself that Ryan had pushed me to this point. If he was being the husband he should be, attentive, romantic, interested in me as a person, then I wouldn't need someone else's attention. This was really his fault for taking me for granted, for making me feel invisible in my own marriage. When Marcus suggested we meet up in person, my first instinct was to say no. But then Ryan came home that night and immediately started talking about some complicated electrical problem he'd dealt with, not even asking about my day, and I felt that familiar frustration bubble up. Why should I have to sit at home being ignored when someone else actually wanted to spend time with me? I agreed to meet Marcus, but I knew I'd need a cover story. I couldn't just tell Ryan I was going out with a friend. He'd want details, and I wasn't ready for that conversation. That's when I thought about using my mom. Ryan liked my mother, trusted her, and it wouldn't be weird for me to spend an evening helping her with something. The plan formed in my head pretty quickly. I'd tell Ryan that mom needed me for something, and I was going to stay over there. I could stop by mom's house to change clothes and fix my makeup, then meet Marcus. Ryan would never suspect anything, because he had no reason not to trust me. And honestly, he'd probably be relieved to have the evening to himself to work on whatever project he was obsessing over that week. I felt a little guilty about lying, but I reminded myself that I wasn't technically doing anything wrong. Marcus and I were just going to hang out, talk, maybe watch a movie. It wasn't like I was planning to cheat on my husband. I was just craving some attention and conversation with someone who appreciated me, and there was nothing really wrong with that. The day I was supposed to meet Marcus, I felt nervous but excited in a way I hadn't in months. I worked my shift at the gas station, came home to Ryan already buried in some work manual, and decided this was definitely the right choice. He barely acknowledged me coming through the door, just grunted something about dinner being in the fridge. This was exactly what I was talking about. I was invisible to him unless he needed something. Around 6 o'clock, I sent Ryan the text I'd been planning. Hey, love. My mom needs me tonight. I'm going to stay there and be home in the morning. He texted back something like, okay, tell her I said hi, which just confirmed how little attention he actually paid to anything I did. A more attentive husband might have asked what mom needed help with, or offered to come along, but not Ryan. He was probably relieved to have the house to himself. I drove to my mom's house feeling this mix of excitement and nervousness. Mom was surprised to see me, but happy enough to visit for a few minutes. I told her I was meeting an old friend from school and asked if I could freshen up in her bathroom. She didn't think anything of it. Why would she? I wasn't acting suspicious. Just a daughter stopping by to see her mother. In Mom's bathroom? I changed into a cuter outfit and redid my makeup. Looking at myself in the mirror, I felt pretty and exciting for the first time in forever. This was what being 24 should feel like. Getting dressed up to meet someone new. Feeling that flutter of anticipation about what might happen. Ryan never made me feel this way anymore. When was the last time he'd even complimented how I looked? Marcus had given me his address, and I felt my heart racing as I drove over there. I kept telling myself this was just two friends hanging out, but I knew it was more than that. The way he looked at me, the way he texted me, the way he made me feel special. This wasn't just friendship, but I pushed down any guilt by reminding myself that I deserved to feel wanted and appreciated. And if Ryan wasn't going to do that, then maybe someone else should. Marcus lived in a nice little house across town, and when he answered the door, he looked even better than I remembered. He'd clearly put effort into how he looked, which was more than I could say for Ryan, who'd been wearing the same work clothes and baseball cap combination for 3 years. Marcus complimented my outfit, offered me a drink, and we settled onto his couch to watch a movie. It felt so good to have someone's full attention, to talk and laugh without hearing about electrical work or job sites. Marcus was funny and charming, asking me questions about myself, actually listening to my answers. When he moved closer to me on the couch, I didn't move away. When he put his arm around me, I leaned into him. It felt natural and right in a way that being with Ryan hadn't in months. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. And for a second, I felt a stab of guilt. But when I read his message, just asking if mom was okay and when I'd be home, I felt annoyed instead. Even when he was checking on me, it was perfunctory, like he was going through the motions of being a caring husband without actually caring. I texted him back, "Yes, my mother's fine. We're both beat and falling asleep on the couch. See you tomorrow?" It felt surprisingly easy to lie, especially when I was sitting next to someone who actually wanted to be with me. Marcus read over my shoulder and made some joke about how I was a good daughter, which made me laugh. See, this was what I'd been missing. Someone who could make me laugh, who paid attention to me, who made me feel alive. What happened next felt inevitable. Marcus kissed me. And instead of pulling away, like I probably should have, I kissed him back. It had been so long since someone had kissed me like they actually wanted me, like I was desirable instead of just convenient. Ryan's kisses had become routine pecks, quick and distracted, but this felt passionate and real. I know what people would say about what I did next, but they don't understand what it's like being married to someone who treats you like a roommate instead of a wife. They don't know what it feels like to be 24 years old and feel like your life is already over. Like you're just going to spend the next 40 years listening to stories about electrical work and pretending to be satisfied with that. With Marcus, I felt like myself again, young, attractive, interesting, alive. He made me feel like I was worth pursuing, worth impressing, worth spending time with. When was the last time Ryan had made me feel any of those things? I couldn't even remember. I stayed at Marcus's house much later than I'd planned, and by the time I finally left, I felt like a completely different person. Driving home the next morning, I was already thinking about when I might see him again, how we could make this work without Ryan finding out. I felt guilty, sure, but I also felt more alive than I had in years. That feeling lasted right up until I turned onto my street and saw all my belongings sitting on the lawn. At first, I thought there had been some kind of mistake. Maybe there'd been a break-in, or a fire, or something that required all our stuff to be moved outside. But as I got closer, I realized it was just my stuff, my clothes, my books, my makeup, everything that belonged to me, sitting in boxes and bags on the grass. Ryan was standing by the front door, and the look on his face made my stomach drop. He wasn't confused or concerned or worried about me. He was furious in a way I'd never seen before. And somehow, I knew he knew. "Get the hell out," he said before I could even get out of my car properly. "We are getting a divorce." My first instinct was to play dumb, to stick to my story about being at Mom's house. "What are you talking about? I was helping my mother. Why is all my stuff outside? Divorce because I care about my mother." I tried to sound incredulous, hurt by his accusation. "Ryan, why are you being so insecure? I told you where I was." But Ryan wasn't buying it. He had this cold, determined look that I'd never seen before, and he kept repeating that we were done, that he wanted me gone, that he'd already talked to a lawyer. I realized that somehow he actually knew what had happened, and my mind raced trying to figure out how that was possible. The more he talked, the more panicked I became. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. I was supposed to come home, go back to my normal routine, and figure out how to see Marcus again without getting caught. I wasn't supposed to be standing in my front yard with all my possessions scattered around like I was some kind of criminal. I tried a different approach, telling Ryan that I'd felt pressured, that I hadn't wanted to do anything. But Marcus had been pushy, and I'd felt like I couldn't say no. Maybe if I painted myself as the victim here, Ryan would realize that I needed his support, not his anger. But Ryan wasn't interested in hearing any explanations. He just kept saying we were done, that he'd already filed for divorce, that I needed to get my stuff and leave. I couldn't believe this was happening. Over one mistake. One night when I'd felt lonely and unappreciated, and someone else had made me feel special. The worst part was how cold Ryan was being about the whole thing. This wasn't the man I'd married, the one who'd promised to love me through better or worse. This was someone I didn't recognize. Someone who could just throw away 6 years together without even trying to work things out. I called my dad, crying, trying to explain what was happening without admitting what I'd actually done. Dad came over and tried to talk sense into Ryan, telling him that marriage takes work, that people make mistakes, that you don't just give up when things get difficult. But Ryan wouldn't listen to anyone. Over the next few weeks, I tried everything I could think of to fix this situation. I had my whole family calling Ryan, texting him, messaging him on social media, trying to convince him that he was overreacting. I mean, yes, I'd made a mistake, but I was only 24 years old. People my age are supposed to make mistakes. That's how you learn and grow. The fact that Ryan couldn't forgive one error in judgment showed how controlling and rigid he really was. My cousin Sophia was the only one who wasn't completely supportive. She pulled me aside at a family dinner and said something about how I'd been sneaky for a while, and maybe I should think about why my marriage had problems before blaming Ryan for everything. I couldn't believe she was taking his side when she barely even knew him. The divorce proceedings were a nightmare. Ryan wanted everything done as quickly as possible, but I kept hoping he'd come to his senses and realize how much he was throwing away. I refused to sign the papers at first, thinking that maybe if I stalled long enough, he'd remember how good we were together, how much we'd built over 6 years. In court, I tried to explain to the mediator that Ryan had been controlling and emotionally distant throughout our marriage, that I'd been feeling isolated and unappreciated for months before anything happened with Marcus. I emphasized how young I was, how this was just one mistake that had happened because I wasn't getting what I needed at home. But Ryan had somehow turned everyone against me. Even the mediator seemed to think I was the villain in this situation. Like I was some kind of master manipulator instead of a young woman who'd made one error in judgment because her husband wasn't meeting her emotional needs. The whole process took months, and Ryan never wavered once. He never called to check on me, never showed any sign that he missed me or regretted his decision. It was like our entire relationship had meant nothing to him, like he could just flip a switch and turn off 6 years of love and commitment. Meanwhile, I was living back at my parents' house, still working at the same gas station, watching my life fall apart because my husband couldn't forgive one mistake. I kept waiting for him to realize what he was losing, to understand that marriages go through rough patches and you're supposed to work through them together, not just bail at the first sign of trouble. The divorce was finally finalized on a Tuesday morning in November. I signed the papers because I didn't have any choice left, but I felt like I was signing away my entire future. Ryan got to keep the apartment. I got nothing except my personal belongings. And just like that, it was over. The worst part is how everyone acts like this whole situation is my fault. Yes, I made a mistake. But Ryan's reaction was completely disproportionate. A good husband would have been angry, sure. But then he would have wanted to work on our problems. Go to counseling? Figure out how to rebuild trust. Instead, Ryan chose the nuclear option, throwing away everything we'd built together because his pride was hurt. Now I'm back where I started, living with my parents, working at the gas station, watching other people live the lives I should be living. Meanwhile, I hear through mutual friends that Ryan got some big promotion at work and is doing great. Like our divorce was the best thing that ever happened to him. He's apparently dating again. Too, though nothing serious. It's like I was just this inconvenient chapter in his life that he's completely moved past. The thing that really gets me is how everyone treats him like the victim in all this. People talk about how betrayed he must have felt, how strong he was for ending things so decisively. But what about how betrayed I felt by his reaction? What about how he abandoned me when I needed him most? When I was dealing with the consequences of a mistake I made because I was lonely and unappreciated. I'm still only 25 years old, and my life feels like it's over because I married someone who couldn't forgive, who couldn't see past one night to all the good years we'd had together. I gave Ryan the best years of my youth, supported him through his apprenticeship, was the perfect girlfriend and wife for 6 years, and the moment I stumbled once, he threw it all away. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Ryan had been a different kind of person, someone more understanding and forgiving. We could have worked through this, gone to counseling, figured out how to fix the problems in our marriage that led to my mistake in the first place. Instead, I'm stuck here in the same dead-end job, living with my parents, starting over at 25 because my husband chose his pride over our relationship. I know people will judge me for what I did, but they don't understand the full situation. They don't know what it was like being married to someone so focused on work that he forgot he had a wife. They don't know what it felt like to be 24 years old and feel invisible, unappreciated, taken for granted. Yes, I handled it wrong. But Ryan's response was so much worse. At least I made my mistake because I was hurting and looking for connection. He ended our marriage because he was too proud and stubborn to forgive. That's the real tragedy here. Not that I made one mistake, but that Ryan couldn't love me enough to work through it. I deserve better than that. And honestly, I still do,